Hey guys, Page One Noir here. I'm going to be talking about a book that's very special to me, and that is the New York Trilogy by Paul Auster. I'm going to be covering some literary techniques and also talk about how the book has changed my writing for the better. I discovered New York Trilogy by Paul Auster pretty much by chance. There was a huge book sale in my city, everything secondhand. Hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of books, all crammed into one warehouse. Kind of looks like this in the picture, but much, much bigger. I think maybe 1,000 people showed up with their bin bags, their shopping trolleys, and multiple grocery bags, and they were taking as many books as they could. When me and my girlfriend just showed up with our backpacks and a good sense of optimism that we would find something interesting to read. Something like detective fiction, something that would be very interesting to read, specifically something noir style, and Paul Auster's The New York Trilogy was actually the first book I found in the warehouse, except when I found it, another shopper was holding it, and I saw their face change as they were reading the blurb from interest to confusion and then to despair, and they put the book back down right where they found it. The first thing that struck my attention was the cover. Has a delightfully rustic feel that I think is very appropriate for New York. The three books on the ground with the mysterious, presumably author, pen in hand, being stood over by a mysterious, perhaps murderer or detective. It's very clearly a mystery story. You can tell that from the get-go. So I managed to score this for about $10, if I remember correctly, which is about $30 or $40 less than you can get it at Dymocks or QBD. I took it home and read it over about 2 months. The only criticism I have with this book is that if you're expecting something like a detective thriller with a lot of chases, maybe some action, you're not going to get a lot of that in this book. A lot of it is introspective, kind of monologuing interior thoughts. Just the way Paul Auster plays with language I think is really clever. I really do think he's an amazing writer. And this is the only book I have read of his though. It's a bit of a slow grind to get through sometimes. There were times where I put the book down for a couple of weeks or a couple of days and didn't pick it up again. But I always came back to it and just to get through those slow parts, but they'd always end up being rewarding. And I think you enjoy this book on a deeper kind of intellectual level. If you're creatively minded like me, you definitely can pick up some of the artistic elements in this. This is a solid piece of literature. I really enjoyed reading it. I'd like to read it again. I will read it again someday because I really enjoyed it the first time around. And it's probably the only book I would read more than once. There's not a lot of books that I read more than once, and this is definitely one of them. Although this is the only Paul Auster book I have read. I haven't read any of his other works. In the first story, City of Glass, Paul Auster shows how language can be manipulated and how all language is invented and that words have associated meanings and that once those meanings change, language becomes this tool that can change reality itself. In Ghosts, he does a similar thing but with names. What I really loved about Ghosts, his second story in this trilogy, is how characters lose their sense of self. They start to believe that they are another person. Usually, in the case of these private detectives, they start to believe that they are the person they're investigating. It's kind of like this delusion that they go under. They spend so much time watching somebody else, investigating somebody else, following them, that they forget who they are themselves. They start to imprint on this person that they're following and start to see themselves as this person in kind of a weird but interesting way. As you read into the novel, Paul Auster himself actually becomes a character, or not really a character, but his name is mentioned as a person who exists in the story. So you get this kind of weird impression that this book is going to end up in the story, which makes it feel even more real. It's kind of a bit of a meta, kind of fourth wall breaking technique that I really, really enjoyed discovering for myself. And I didn't know anything about Paul Auster before I picked up his book. So I wasn't even sure if Paul Auster was a real person or if he was just a character that he was going to appear in this book. And I didn't Google it until the end. And having that kind of immersion in this book, I think kept me interested as well. But I'm not claiming to know everything about this book. I did read it more than a year ago, so there's probably a lot of stuff I'm not mentioning. When I do come around to rereading it, though, I will be able to give a more in-depth analysis of it. But for now, I just wanted to share my thoughts on it because I really, really love this book. It's impacted my writing because it's made me think of how characters can change, not just with the external changes in the world that's happening, but also internally. How their minds change, break down, how their personalities become somewhat entirely new sometimes. But also how sometimes the characters in this book are willing to change their entire lives because they become completely obsessed with this case. In City of Glass, the protagonist actually becomes homeless for a period of time that he can't even keep track of, all for the sake of finding information on this one guy. And those are my thoughts on Paul Auster's The New York Detective Trilogy. If you guys enjoyed it, please leave a like. And if you have any books that you want me to read and you want me to check out and do a review on, please share your suggestions in the comments below and I will definitely check them out. And if you guys enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe. It really does help me out a lot. I appreciate your support. This was Page One Noir on the Page One Noir channel. Thanks for watching.